Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. It is a Tuesday, the day before this video goes up. And we were looking this month about who we wanted to showcase. And I wanted to do a girl singer. You know, we just did Paralyze with Jay. I wanted to do a girl singer, and a couple of artists sprung to mind. Initially I was thinking of Alexandra Brown, because we did that sort of acoustic-y EP with her, very Colby Calais. And I put one of her songs up a couple of weeks ago and got a really great response. But what sprang to my mind just the other day was Christina Holmes. Christina Holmes is one of our favourite clients. And a lot about what we do is talk about how to interact with artists. And, you know, part of that is like how you present yourself initially to clients, and you know, the process of like courting them to get the work and them coming to you is very interesting. With Christina, she was a fan of the Trevor Hall albums we've made 2 albums and 2 EPs, and his biggest album is an album called Chapter of the Forest, which does remarkably well. In fact, there's one song on that album which I think has 30 million plays already, and the album together, because it was a double album, is in the hundreds of millions of plays. So for an independent artist, he's incredibly successful. And she was a fan, or is a fan, of Trevor. And you're going to find that regardless of that being such a big album, that just the fact that you do an album that people like the sound of, you get work. You know, girls like Christina aren't going and looking at Spotify numbers. They're just liking the music. And Trevor has a great following, especially as a live artist. And that is also how Christina Holmes makes her bread and butter. She is touring all the time, playing tons and tons of shows, and comes to us, this is now her 2nd album, comes to us every year or 2 and makes a record. The artist we just had in up until yesterday was Brenda McMorrow. Again, another fan of Trevor's and another fan of that genre. And this has been really good for us to work with artists that frankly love acoustic instruments. Trevor is unique in that he plays drums, plays some bass, plays guitars, plays banjo and sings, and a bit of piano. So I played some electric guitar, and we had some stand-up bass from Dan Rothschild, and then of course his own bass player Brian came down. Then with Christina, she also plays drums. On this she's playing, well, let's go through. I can tell you everything she played. She played the djembe. She did the beatbox, or that may have been me, I can't remember. We'll listen to it in a second. Acoustic is all her. She sung obviously on everything and did all the backgrounds. Did I do the backgrounds as well? I think it's me. Is it Lindsay? Me? Definitely not Eric.
Whoa!
So I think I did some of the backgrounds. You're going to hear that. But as you can see here, if you're watching down here, there's a huge amount, like this big blob of scrolling backgrounds, which is actually forms the basis of the song. So this is a very, very unique song for you. You're going to get to sort of see how I built vocals up and created kind of a bass. The song's relatively successful. It's not huge Spotify numbers, maybe you know, 10,000 or something like that. But in her community, in her music community, and the bands that she tours with and the artists she tours with, this is a fan favorite. It's called Everybody Knows. So once again, getting back to my initial point, is like working with artists and having a little bit of a niche. It's like I have lots of niches, of course. I have people that come to me because they want to do piano rock because of the Fray and Augustana, those 2 records, or 3 records, 2 Fray records and an Augustana record. I get piano rock guys. I get classic rock guys because I work with Aerosmith. But I get more work and more steady work from the independent artists that work with other independent artists. Trevor Hall, as a successful independent artist, has got me more work than any Aerosmith record has, believe it or not. You appeal to different things. You appeal to different ways, in different ways to different people, sorry. The best way I can describe it is what Dave Jordan told me when I worked with him in the late 90s. At that point, he was at the top of his career. He had just done Offspring Americana, which had sold 25 million copies worldwide. He had done 2 Offspring records. He had done all the Jane's Addiction records up until that point. He'd done all the big Alice in Chains records as a producer, engineer, and mixer. So he was getting all the points on those records, was doing great, was killing it, was making a lot of money, very successful. And of course had worked as an engineer with Herbie Hancock. He'd worked with Michael Beinhorn on Rocket, and Bill Laswell. He had done Remain in Light, Talking Heads, one of the best-selling records ever. He was the engineer and, of course, mixed it as well with Eno and David Byrne. Wonderful stuff. He had done a Stones record, not his high point in his career. It was, for him, he said, personally working with him was like 18 months, and it was the album Dirty Work. But sonically, definitely not one of the best Stones albums. But, you know, he'd obviously enjoyed the process. He has videos, by the way, of that album, like old-style video camera videos of them making the record. I wonder if they'll ever let us see those. I've seen them, but if they'll let us digitize them for you, that'd be pretty amazing. Okay, so he'd done all these things, loads of highlights. You can look up his resume, insane. And he made a lot of money and been very successful with big rock bands. And the thing about like Alice in Chains and Jane's Addiction is he had been in there early and developed them and worked with them. Nobody else cared. You know, the Alice in Chains first record sat on the shelf for a year. Didn't do anything. He believed in it, and it wasn't until grunge came along that people went and started to listen to it and look at it. So basically, he had paid his dues. So this is what he told me, long story. He goes, record companies like to work with him because of albums like Americana, because they sold 25 million records. The record companies just looked at him from a perspective of like, we need a rock producer who can sell millions of records. Artists all came to him whenever he would sit down and have a dinner or a breakfast or a lunch with an artist, you know, that meeting to see whether they were going to work together. He said to a man, every single artist that wanted to work with him because he did the Love, Spit, Love record. Love, Spit, Love. That is the brothers from the Psychedelic Furs band outside of the Psychedelic Furs. They did a cover, most famously, you'll probably know, they did a cover of How Soon Is Now by the Smiths, which is a theme tune for a TV show. But that came later. But people loved it because they loved the sound of that record. So, what am I trying to teach you here? I'm trying to express that you can do the big records and we can get carried away. And yes, it's really good to have a resume. Of course it is, to have a resume of very successful artists. But the artists love you, and in the level that all of us are, everybody's now working at. You know, because if you're a rock producer and a rock mixer, you know, Andrew Sheps, Eric Valentine, all these guys now are doing things outside of just working on records. The people you don't hear about, like Serban Gurnier, people ask me all the time, Serban Gurnier, get him on the show. He's too busy. He mixes every single pop thing out there. He's absolutely killing it. He's not going to come and do a YouTube video. Maybe he will. Maybe I can twist his arm. He's mixed some stuff for me. Maybe he will. Maybe we'll get him on the show. Between him and Spike Stent, who occasionally gives some interviews, I'm sure I'll get him at some stage. We are from the same town and did go to the same school, so you think I should be able to. I don't think I've tried actually yet, but now I'm talking about it. Spike Stent, let's interview him. The reality is like these guys aren't making plugins. They're not, you know, they're not like popping up. They don't have their own YouTube channels. They're not this stuff because they're not busy. They're not working. So how do I stay so unbelievably busy and busier than all those guys? It's because I do a schnizzle ton of independent artists outside of the major labels. You'll see me do an Ace Frehley and a Rick Springfield album every year. If you go to look at my resume, you'll see that I'll be doing new Ace Frehley. I've done 2 Rick Springfield records, and I will get a splattering of songs and stuff. We do that every year. Every year we do at least 2 top 40 albums to keep the credits and the credibility and like, oh yeah, you know, Warren, yeah, he just did a Rick Springfield record. We've got a new one coming out. I don't know when it's coming out. Isn't it? Shouldn't it already be out? Anyway, we did a full orchestral record with Rick Springfield. It's amazing. Look out for it. It will be our big top 40 album this year. You know, and then we do other stuff, label stuff in between, bits and pieces. You know, last year we did a Disturbed thing and another Rick Springfield and an Ace Frehley. And other people. But my point is like, I will always do those and we'll always rack up 2 or 3, like, records that keep you in the public eye. And those won't go away, and that's great. But what do we do in the meantime? In the meantime, we roll up our sleeves, metaphorically speaking. There's no sleeves to roll up today. I'm wearing a short sleeves. And we get stuck in and we make tons and tons of independent records. And I'm always juggling the independent records. And we're choosing who to work with, how to work with. And in fact, as Eric and I get busier with all of the stuff we do, all of the online stuff, all of the academy stuff, we're getting more selective, which is a blessing. But the real work, the real money in the music industry is there to be made for all of you. And it is built out of credits and credibility, but it's your work. Your work speaks for yourself. So if you work in a genre or genres, you know, be multi-talented, but you work and you get enough of the success sonically speaking, you will get work because people will be like, well, who did that album? Because I was making Trevor Hall albums even when he was signed to Vanguard for $30,000 all in, everything. The recording, the studio time, you know, paying Eric, Phil in those days, then Sam, and all of the musicians we had to hire and the studio time and everything. So it wasn't like a big budget, even though it was on a pretty major sized label. You know, those were 6-week albums. So, you know, I know it's a decent amount of money, don't get me wrong, but it's not a $400,000 album or $500,000 album of only, you know, 10 years before that. So now I'm making, of course, independent albums at, you know, a fraction of that, but I'm making lots of them and making a good living, making a good, what I would call an upper middle class living, especially living in Los Angeles. This is a possibility, and it's what we teach here and what we talk about. And definitely when I get back from England, I'm going to England in about 2 hours to Genelec to go to Metropolis Studios. But when I get back next week, we'll do a live Skype call. So can you put that in the calendar for Wednesday of next week, please, Eric? So we'll do a live business conversation, sort of based off a lot of this, because there's a lot to talk about. And I think we need to sort of help each other hone our skills. I mean, we do. I mean, like every week we do a Feedback Friday and the level gets higher and higher and higher. And people coming in are like elevated super quick from all of the conversation that goes on inside the academy. It's insane. I mean, there's nothing like it. You guys and girls have built one of the best communities ever. I was with API Saturday. It was Saturday. I was with API on Saturday at Sunset Sound. I stepped out for an hour or two from the session with Brenda and went down there and I met with one of the main guys at API, or two of the main guys. And he's like, your community's insane. Nobody has a community like this. Nobody has a community that's just completely positive and helping each other. Now we get the odd interloper every now and then that tries to sort of like, you know, make it their own and get a little ornery or whatever, but it's like nothing compared with what other people deal with. This community is insanely positive. You know, this is all, there's no egos here, you know, and everybody helps everybody else. And we've helped people in so many different ways. And you know what I'm talking about. Those of you that are long-term members know that it goes beyond just like positive comments and plug-in stuff. I mean, people have physically helped each other. We've helped and brought so many people happiness because this is genuine. And I was just talking to Mike Vanderlot, the sales manager for Lewitt, who's one of the best people in our business. For instance, Academy member just emailed me and said, trying to buy some mics from Vintage King, the 040s, the Lewitt 040s. Apparently they're out of stock until October. I was like, that may be true. They're massively successful. They're probably the biggest selling small diaphragm condensers out there. And so, you know, they didn't even know how successful they're going to be. So what do? I Skype Mike Vanderlot 9 hours ahead. So it was 10 o'clock at night. 10 o'clock at night, and I said, hey, Mike, just got an Academy member, emailed me, said they were trying to buy some Lewitt LCT 040s from Vintage King. Vintage King said that they're back ordered until October, and he said, correct. We did not anticipate how successful these were going to be. There is a cargo ship leaving in a couple of weeks full of more of these, and they will be back in stock early October. I mean, our community is so good. It's so good. People care because they realize that you watching are so powerful. You're so powerful. You talk to each other. You help each other out. Do you know how unique that is? When I open up the Academy pages and I see in the forums or I see on the Facebook page and I just see how people support or the chat going on, it's unique. It's really unique. You know, it's really unique. It's unbelievable. Anyway, Why am I waffling on about it? Because this is something that if we absorb and you all take it to heart and realize just how good of people you are, this will materialize in your life. Your work will get better, yes, but the people you attract into your life will get better. I mean, we don't get crazy, drugged out, not even drugged out. We don't get that many crazy artists. I get issues every now and then, and I've got the past to prove of that stuff, and I can relate to you. But we've created an atmosphere where somebody like Christina Holmes comes to us because of the music and because she feels safe in our being here and working with her, because we make her feel special and she feels rewarded, and we indulge every idea she has, and she shines, and she's wonderful. Anyway, thank you for being an amazing community. Let's get into the song. Whoa. So if we get to the end of the song here, you're going to see it gets pretty big.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody, everybody, everybody. Everybody knows. Everybody, everybody knows. 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 Everybody knows.
You can tell she's pretty talented. I don't remember if that was me actually ended up playing bass or whether that was her. Let's have a listen. I think that's me. She played bass on a ton of this stuff, but that may have been her, but I think that's me just because it sounds like one of my lines. Or I may have sung it to her and she played it. Okay, so starting from the top, the way we record a djembe is we have the djembe tilted back. Okay, here is our djembe. Try and put it where I'm sitting. Now, obviously, the head at the top is where all the ring is. The low end, you guessed it, comes out the bottom. It's like Now, depending how it's played, when you hit the side and the edge, there's less low end. So when I'm playing it here, this area, you still hear the low end, but you don't get as much as. So you can... You can tell I'm not a djembe player. Anyway, those that are very good, like, of course, Christina and Dave Allen, who came in the other day, they know how to perform on this really, really well. We bought one because, quite frankly, we had so many people coming in requesting one. We ended up renting them, and then just frankly, they sound amazing. This isn't a cheap one, it's not an expensive one, it's somewhere in the middle. It's a Remo. I bought it on Christina's record. And I really love it. And I bought it under Dave Allen's recommendation, who's one of the best drummers we work with. He's a phenomenal drummer and an amazing percussionist who plays on so many incredible records. You know, he's worked he's worked on like rock and metal, and he's also worked in Kirtan. Like, he does everything. He's like the drummer's drummer. Dave Allen, Australian guy, really wonderful player. So he recommended this Remo. So we went down to the Pro Drum on Vine Street in Los Angeles, and they had the exact model. And it's called, it's a Remo. I don't know the model number off the top of my head, but it is the most consistent sounding one. There's a lot of like, you know, handmade ones from Africa and other countries which are really wonderful, but this is just like consistent and super well made. It's really beautiful. So anyway, how do we mic it? We put one mic on the top for the head. And that can be anything, usually a small diaphragm condenser, or sometimes what we did the other day is we actually put a 47, so we put a large diaphragm condenser on the top. Then what we do is we take a kick drum mic and put it here. So the player playing it is pretty much sitting at an angle like this. So they can balance it. Some people have stands that allow it to balance at this angle, and you put your large or small diaphragm condenser, whatever you want, on the top here, and on the bottom you put a kick drum mic. So typically, I don't know if Eric can get the thing, it's something like this on the ground. So guy or girl sitting here. You've got kick drum mic here, and you've got a mic coming over the top here for the head. That's how you mic it. Now, with Christina, the thing is you're always going to get that low end, which is cool, but you're always going to get the low end. But when I came to mix this, we made a decision. We decided we wanted to separate out the low end and the high end in the same way that we would with a bass guitar. However, I didn't want the low end to be reinforced on the djembe top. So if you listen to the djembe top with no EQ on, have a listen. You can obviously hear where the kick portion is, the low end. So if I put the EQ in, it's rolling off the low end, have a listen. So you hear the ring is the snare part of it. I know it's not a snare, but I'm going to call it a snare for the sake of argument. That's like what you're more likely to hear on the 2 and the 4. And then the little plap sound is the high end of what would be the low end, the kick sound. Look, I cannot recommend a djembe enough to have in your arsenal. What's great about it is if you can get somebody, and look, I've never really used it, but I'm sure with a little bit of practice I could get it to sound somewhat authentic, meaning I've got a different kind of instrument to provide a kind of a 2 and a 4 and a 1 and a 3. I could build a different groove up, so it's a nice thing to have if you're into sort of experimenting with instruments. Okay, so the low end, what we ended up doing is, if you see on the top here, it's grayed out, we initially decided to just remove, and we went in there and we actually took out all of the top stuff out of it. Then we ended up just cheating and taking a clean sample of a djembe hit, of the djembe being hit. Almost sounds like an 808, there's so much low end. And just flew that against it. So now those two elements together give us a very, very isolated low end and high end. Meaning in the groove, if I go somewhere into the middle of the song, it's just good and separated. Now, the Brendan McMorrow record I just did with Dave Allen playing on it, I let the low end go the whole time. So there's a little bit of low end reinforcement on the top, but I liked it. It's all player dependent and song dependent. Okay, so let's have a quick look at So you saw the EQ on the top half of it. It's really just 328 hertz here, just high passed away. So we got rid of like low mids and low end out of the top mic. On the bottom mic, of course, we did the opposite. There's a trim control, which is just phase reversing it. So it's in phase with the, you see here, just in phase with that. Although it looks quite frankly quite good. Yeah, that's quite good actually. I could probably take it off. But anyway, there you go. And then the MV2, the ever omnipresent MV2, which is just bypass it. It's just allowing the low end of the signal, the volume in the low end, to always be reinforced. When somebody asked me just yesterday or this morning, I think it was on a video, YouTube video, what's your favorite plugin? What's the one you can all go to? I just answered MV2, Waves MV2. I think it's the most useful plugin I own. It's interesting, when I've done the challenges using other people's plugins, I found I can mix anything, except I missed the MV2 and the R-Bass. It's just the two plugins. There's other limiters, there's other compressors, there's other EQs, there's other reverbs and delays, but I always come back to the MV2. Waves asked me to do a list of my favorite plugins, and and those are the ones that always keep coming up. Okay, then the REQ, as you can see, 800 hertz basically, high passed away. Sorry, low passed away. So it's all just low end. And then the R-Bass is reinforcing at 80 hertz, and then another MV2 to control it. And that gives those two, it's really low ending. Those speakers are like, the console's going so much low end in here. But it's great, it's almost hip hop. Great. Okay, so there's a little bit of verb going on there. Of course, I rolled off the low end going into the reverb for the djembe. Little bit of verb going on that. And then we have the beatbox. Got a bit of a Mac DSP going on here. Using the compression pretty aggressively. Fastest attack and release times just to grab it on both elements. Threshold's really pulled down here, so really using it to just control it and also bring up the volume of it. So that would be a fun beatbox for you to have. You'll be able to use that on other recordings. It's a great way of creating extra movement in the groove outside of using shakers and tambourines, using this. If I mute it. Bring it back in. It's just a little. So before we move on to the acoustic guitar, I've got to point out the fact that the djembe and the kick end of the djembe, the low end, are both going through my console on 1 and 2. So I'm using similar settings. So let's just go over to here for a second. Dum, 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 dum. So follow me. This is quite important to note. So the kick end of it, the low end, has got a schnizzle ton of boost here. Quite a lot of boost going on about 50 or 60 hertz. Let me get used to using the phone properly. There you go. So quite a lot of boost. And then, of course, I'm also using the API to give me more boost. So I'm coming out what I would call my kick channel. You see, and there's a ton of 63 there. And then there's low mid kick, low mid cut. And again, there's low mid cut here. So there's low mids are being cut actually quite a little bit higher, like 500. And then there's some 2.5 and a little bit of 8K. So I'm treating it almost like a kick drum. And that is, of course, most importantly, going through our sub channel here, which is even more low end. And that's that huge bottom end you hear. Have a listen. That massive bottom end is this, and it's being hit super hard. It's blowing up the speakers. It's the 120. It's the DBX 120. I mean, that's being annihilated. It's distorting, it's ugly, and I like it. You know, it's just, in the heat of mixing, we'll go back over here. In the heat of mixing, that's what happens. You know, in the heat of mixing, I'll just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until I like the sound of it. It means that the low end is massive. And it's probably too big in some realms, but for what we wanted to do here, it was absolutely perfect. I love the low end. So really, really good. Is it distorting? Yeah, it's distorting. But, you know, that's part of the process. Now with the bass here, it's our usual trick. Our bass is, as you can see here on the DI, because I'm going more of a kind of like low subby thing. You see I passed here at 92, and then the amp. So I actually took out some low mids. So it's all about boosting the super, super lows. Little bit of R comp there, just a bit. Shaving off, and you know I like to do this, so I'm high passing going into a bass boost. The reason why I do that is I control what's being boosted. Because if I just go to the R bass here, without that on, without that second REQ, without that REQ on, sorry, it will just boost super, super lows that I don't want. There I can hear a little bit of 20 and 40 that I don't need. And now it's a little bit more shaped because I put this EQ on. So there's a reason to high pass before going into a bass boost. People ask me a lot about putting EQ before and after reverbs, for instance, and I always put the EQ before the reverb because I don't mind a little bit of overtones going on that the reverb's going to generate, or in this case, an R bass of low end that's going to generate, but I don't want it to be excessive, so I control the signal going in. Maybe I might, if necessary, EQ after the reverb, but I don't like, then it sounds like the sound is EQ'd. Do you know what I mean? So it sounds like the reverb or the bass boost has been clamped down. And I don't really want to do that. I'd rather control it so it just feels, you know, it can have a little bit of excessive 20 or 40, just a little bit creeping in, as opposed to like a brick wall removal. You know, that's the difference between making it sound natural or not. Okay, then the R bass and finishes up with an MV2. Yes, you hear me say it all the time, one of my favorites. The acoustic has no treatment on it apart from a recording. And I think this is her little seagull guitar, isn't it a seagull? I don't remember. It's just like a little guitar that she has. It's not tiny, but like a triple O size acoustic. She did use my Yamaha a couple of times, but I believe this is hers. Guitar is slightly panned left, reverb is panned all the way to the right, and it's a 750 millisecond, 3/4 of a millisecond reverb. The only thing really going on here, so if I walk around over here, is acoustic, is the EQ, nothing in the low end, nothing in the mid-range, and just a little bit of boost at about 7K and a little bit of boost about 9K. So all I'm doing is boosting high mids, high end and high mids, and rolling off at about 80. So I'm high passing at about 80, and on the top there about 10K. So that's basically all I'm doing there. Hello. So what I'm doing, you see what I'm doing there? I'm really just kind of controlling the low lows, but again, subtly on the console, not excessive amounts. There's no low end boost. The only low end cut is just high passing, and then some high mids and high end kind of boost, just a gentle slope on the top. So then obviously the advantage of using an SSL EQ. Now, for the lead vocal, I've got my pretty similar to what I always do. You'll see this, you know, it all changes slightly depending on the singer, but I'm using the same kind of combination of plugins. I've got an Arvox, just giving us about 7.5 dB of gain reduction.
Everybody knows that this is how it's supposed to be.
So I'm maybe hitting 3 or 4 dB on that, 3 or 4 dB of gain reduction. That's going into a trim plugin, which is always on there as a default. There's no phase reverse, it's just a little bit of a cut. And that's going into a vocal rider.
Everybody knows that this is how it's supposed to be.
And I just set a target around about there. So the target's basically set so it hits the vocal where it's going to be most of the times. And then when she drops off, it just boosts it back up again. So it's giving me like another 2 to 3 dB of, you know, gain build back up. If you listen and watch at the same time, go see where I set the target.
Everybody knows that this is how it's supposed to be. And everybody knows it's all about family. And all the people that surround me, we all really just want to be free. Oh, everybody knows.
So what's nice about it is it just at the end of, you know, the end of the phrases just get a little bit of boost, and then some of the when she's hitting a little harder, get a little bit of a cut. So it's similar to what a compressor does, obviously, but it's done on a fader. It's done old school, if you like, the classic, you know, Al Schmitz and Bruce Botnick's, when they talk about how they started off and they were just riding everything on faders. And why do we use the vocal rider? Well, we use it because it has less sonic imprint. The vocal was already recorded, you know, using, you know, a BAE mic pre, going through a DBX 165, which is a 160 VU, but it has attack and release controls on it, going into an 1176. So it had a lot of personality, a lot of like grit and color and stuff is being added. The Arvox itself always seems to bring out thickness and low mids. Just some girth. So the vocal rider's there just to, you know, tickle it into the right position. There is then a de-esser.
Everybody knows.
And I'll sometimes put a de-esser right at the beginning of the chain. But you're going to see my usual trick. So de-esser going into a EQ, high passing, getting rid of about 100 hertz and below, but also boosting 8.5K, but a really wide boost. So I'm making the vocal brighter, then immediately compressing it again.
Everybody knows that this is how it's supposed to be.
Again, like 3 or 4 dB of compression. Then going into another EQ, rolling off some of the low end, which is now being squashed up. And then going into, yes, you guessed it, another de-esser.
Everybody knows that this is how it's supposed to be.
So a couple of instances of compression, serial compression. We've got 2 compressors on this, but we've also got a vocal rider, so it's doing that as well. We've got 2 instances of EQ and 2 de-essers. So we're really controlling high-end boost, but then also controlling how much of that high-end boost is being used with the de-esser. And then we've got a vocal distortion channel.
Everybody knows it's all about fam.
And I can solo that on the console, so have a listen.
Everybody knows that this is how it's supposed to be.
So what you're hearing here is distortion, the octave of the vocal, and the whisper track all going at once.
Everybody knows that this is how it's supposed to be.
It's very quiet.
Everybody knows it's all about family.
So it's like everybody. Got the whisper, you've got the everybody, the low octave and distortion. All 3 of those elements are playing at once. They're not very loud compared with the lead vocal. If I put it up against the lead vocal.
Everybody knows
But I'll take it in and out.
This is how it's supposed to be. And everybody knows
Out.
It's all about family.
In.
And all the people that surround me. We all really just want.
So it's subtle, but a little bit of distortion, a little bit of low octave, a little bit of whisper. Sometimes, you know, when I had a really intimate vocal with her and with other singers, I pushed that whisper vocal up really, really hot. These are all the tricks that I use all the time, and you'll see them, but I blend them in different ways. There's no one size fits all. This track is fine if it's a little dirty, a little distorted, a little wrong. It's a passionate song. She's singing about something that really means something to her. When we first started working together on the album before this, she had just lost a very important member of her family. and it's probably too personal for me to share. And it was a big deal for her, and it's what inspired her to make her first solo record with me. And you know, there's a lot of that goes into artists as wonderful as Christina, people that really are passionate and believe really strongly in what they do. Now the H3, this is really important, the H3000 here is the vocal thickening trick. Now when you come to mix this, you don't necessarily have to use a lot of it. Oh, it's muted on the console. I just muted it to play back the other effects, but have a listen. Now we did recently get the H9000, and Eric and I are talking about how to emulate this effect that we get from the H3000. So watch out for that. That will probably come up soon. There is going to be a review of the H9000. It's not cheap, but it's amazing. And then of course we have the multi-effects that we print from our lexicon. Super quiet. I mean, barely audible. They're there. And I think this is something that if you've got hardware delays and hardware reverbs and you've got sounds you like, just print them back in and then you can push them where you want. You see, we've got sections here where it doesn't go that loud, but yeah, if I wanted to, I could push them up there. With lead vocals in the H3000, the thickening trick with the detuning, quite often I'll push those up in choruses and leave them down in verses because the choruses get more dense. Okay, so what else do we add? Now it's all really about vocals. There's the chant that goes all the way through. So we can get to that. And this is all Christina doing it. And she just built these in seconds and then we flew them. It's the main one. So that's all the main part there. And then another part comes in. So there's a hey, and there's a hey with a harmony. And then it's, you know, it basically, what I would suggest, Eric, is when you send these, anybody that's in Pro Tools, we can send these with the settings that we have. You can make your own blends up, of course. In fact, I actively encourage it. But you know, we can send you the original settings. Would you do that, Eric? So the levels that they're at. So Eric's going to send you the levels they're at, because if you're in Pro Tools, that's what people would provide. And it's hitting it pretty hard. It's hitting it pretty hard. The only thing that was going on here is a little tiny bit of reverb. That is it. Everything else is actually happening on the console because I'm narrowing the vocals, getting rid of some low lows and some high highs, so it doesn't take up too much room. I'll show you that in 1 second. I think what we should do, Eric, is we'll print. What we're going to do is we'll give you all of the individual vocals so you can hear them, but we'll print a stereo background track. So you're going to have a stereo track, which you can choose to use, because quite frankly, if I got a session like this, I might go back to the producer and say, how do you want me to balance this? And they either give me a stereo track so they can hear, I can hear what they did, or I just use the stereo track. So I'm going to give you that option. So hopefully everybody watches this video and knows that. So what I'm doing is high and low passing. That's it. That's the only EQ that's going on the console, just high and low passing, and some gentle compression. So you can emulate all of those things. It's a lot of stuff to do. You know, like I said, it's also similar to these guitars here. These guitars are looped. I mean, I would probably give you these independent, but there's a lot of them. You'll get to hear what they do. Like this. Here's the guitars. This is me playing, obviously. Well, not obviously, but it's me playing. So I added it because I wanted movement. So there's two parts going on. I built up a chord in movement on single notes and then added that arpeggio. And all together we get.
Everybody knows, oh-ohs. Everybody knows. Everybody knows.
So you see, it's a pretty fun song. I think it's very indicative of Christina as an artist. It's a great illustration of who she is. I think it's a good signature for her. Like I say, the reason why she really went into the detail and we did all of these stacked vocals was because she gets the audience to sing at her shows. And she plays some big shows. She may not have like massive Spotify numbers, but she opens for really big artists and she does really well. So I don't know if you know Narco and the Medicine People. She opens for him. Trevor Hall, obviously, we were talking about. She's played on all these big festivals and she's very, very compelling. She can go out there with just an acoustic guitar and sing and get 5,000 people. She can divide them up and say, everybody over here, sing this part, everybody over there. It's really good. She's an incredibly well-versed performer and just a really, really genuine person. And I think the reason why I wanted to give you all the background and talking about this stuff is because I think it's very powerful and very important to learn from the fact that we have this amazing community and look for like-minded people. And you'd be surprised. You take the energy that you learn in here and that you see, you know, from the way that we work and the people we work with and apply it to life. And I'm not trying to be all mumbo-jumbo, airy-fairy about this. It is really important. If you go with a good positive attitude and you reward people and you indulge their ideas. She plays everything on this. Okay, I think I probably played the bass and I played those electrics, but all the parts are worked out with her. She comes back with notes. She is involved. She's no slouch. There's plenty of songs on this record. She played and sang everything. Drums. She did the djembe on this, obviously, I couldn't. She does the drums. She plays bass on loads of tracks and acoustic guitars and electrics and sings and does everything. You know, and I wonder, because she told me the first album she made with somebody really famous, Naralda Michael Warden. I'm sure you all know that. All he did was get her to sing, and the vocals are super tuned, and it sounds like a pop girl. And this is obviously not a pure pop artist. So, great lesson in learning how to produce, about how to get the best out of artists, understand them, spend time with them, and cultivate. Because if you make this a place where an artist feels safe to work with you, you'll get amazing results. And that's what we got time and time again with Christina. And she's grown as an artist, and I feel like she's a good friend of mine, and I trust her and she trusts me. And we're 2 albums in. She pays really well. It's not like massive amounts of money, but it is very well for an independent artist, and she values what I do, and that is the kind of thing that we're trying to cultivate. And I hope that you get many of these kind of records to make, and you get to work with artists that you get excited about, and you can do really cool guitar parts like that and build things and have fun. So anyway, have a great time mixing this song. I'll see you again in a few days. I'm going to London, going to Metropolis. I'll be back in back on Friday evening, and then we're going to do next Wednesday, the live stream, aren't we? We're going to do a live stream on Wednesday morning. We'll also do a live Friday morning stream back again. It's going to be very exciting. It's going to be live stream week. All right.